it's possible to make a buck and give objective advice, but when it comes to vitamins, herbs, homeopathic products, it doesn't happen.
Right. In practice, it never happens. Even though in theory, it'd be possible.
Tens of thousands of people and websites and books, and it doesn't happen. It's different. There used to be doctors who dispense drugs, and they might make a little money. And that never bothered me because they can do it properly, and probably they do. But
it bothers me.
Sometimes it's very convenient. As long as they're not price gouging, it's actually a benefit. But it's got a bad rap, and doctors don't do it much anymore.
Welcome to Think Bigger, Think Better, where we explore how you can apply insights from visionary leaders and the most provocative philosophers and scientists of our time to make your life and our world a better place. Here's your host, author and speaker, Paul Gibbons.
Hey, welcome back to Think Bigger, Think Better. Today, we're going to talk about quackery, all the medical scams and scammers out there, and including vitamin scams, chiropractic, kinesiology, and including Deepak Chopra, Joseph Mercola, and Dr. Oz. But first, I'd like to offer a shout out to a listener called Paul Thorison from Minnesota, who suggested that I trim my intros and get more quickly to the guests. So I'm going to try and do that. But it raises a bigger question. How do I make this our podcast? What suggestions do you have for how I can improve them? What suggestions do you have for guests? Please tell me in the comments or send me an email. You can comment on either Paul Gibbons Author on Facebook, where I post the podcast, or on my website below the podcast, or on Twitter. Upcoming on the show, I have Jacques Attali, former advisor to French President Mitterrand and founder of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which was tasked with rebuilding Eastern Europe following the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Then we're going to have Ann Hulbert. She's an editor at The Atlantic, talking about today's parenting culture, and also her new book on gifted children. And also coming up, we have Matthew Taylor, who's the chief executive of the Royal Society of Arts. In full disclosure, I'm a fellow. And he's going to be talking about a project he's done for the British Prime Minister called The Future of Employment. So a fascinating set of podcasts coming, and I'd like to thank you in advance for all your support and listening and sharing. And if you've contributed on Patreon, $1 an episode or $5 an episode, I'd like to thank you for that also. Thank you very much. So, on to quackery. Quackery, according to Wikipedia, is the promotion of fraudulent or ignorant medical practices. A quack is a fraudulent or ignorant pretender to medical skill, or a person who pretends, professionally or publicly, to have skill, knowledge, qualification, or credentials he or she does not possess. A charlatan or a snake oil salesman. Quackery is all around us. It preys often on the gullible. But as you'll hear within this podcast, I and my family have sometimes been the victim. Around us everywhere, there are supplements and chelation therapies, chiropractic, colonic therapies, kinesiology, homeopathy, herbal medicine. And that doesn't begin to get into nutrition, the wheat belly, or non-celiac gluten intolerance. It also doesn't get into anti-vaxxers, because some quacks don't solve problems. They just try to undermine established medical science. I say established, of course, in quotes. If you've listened to enough of these podcasts, you know that science is never cut and dried. But with things like vaccination, there's an almost uniform medical certainty, except among the quack community. And of course, famously, Steve Jobs was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Usually, by the time you detect pancreatic cancer, it's too late to do much, but a biopsy showed this was the good kind, operable, and he had a reasonable prognosis. However, he refused surgery. He consulted dozens of alternative medicine practitioners until 18 months later, the cancer had spread. The operation was mandatory, but the metastases that had formed during the 18 months period proved too much, and he soon passed away. A very bright person, again, who succumbed to the harm that can befall us all, but certainly befalls people who take advice from non-qualified people when serious illnesses and trivial illnesses. Today, to talk about quackery, we have Stephen Barret, who's made it his life project. As he says, by the age of 40, I'd found a great wife. I've established a career, had a nice home and a living for myself. I decided I want to make a difference. Well, now, Stephen Barrett's 85, so he's been at this for, he says, since 1976, so that's 42 years. He's a retired psychiatrist. He lives in North Carolina, and he's published, can you believe, 52 books, including The Health Robbers, A Close Look at Quackery, and 8 editions of a college textbook called Consumer Health, A Guide to Intelligent Decisions. Links to those are, of course, in the show notes. He's appeared on Dateline, The Today Show, Good Morning America, ABC Primetime, Donahue, CNN, NPR, and more than 200 different radio and television talk show interviews in his career. What's also remarkable about our 85-year-old Dr. Barret is that he's won 93 state championship events in swimming and 33 medals in national events and 9 medals in international events. Now, that's pretty good for 85. But the amazing thing is that he started right around in his 40s. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that he's pretty cool. Today in the show, we're going to talk about Chelation. We're going to talk about chiropractic. We're going to talk about prescription drug pricing in the United States. We're going to talk about tobacco, ephedra, vitamins, homeopathy, kinesiology, and much more. Dr. Barret, Stephen, welcome to Think Bigger, Think Better. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let me ask you this. You had an academic career as a psychiatrist, and then it looks like around the early 1980s, you began to take an interest in alternative medicine and quackery. Is that the correct timeline?
No, it was the late 60s. I read a couple of books, one about the government effort against patent medicines and over-the-counter drug fraud, and the other one was about chiropractors. And I wound up becoming concerned about doing something, but I didn't know what to do and did nothing. And then when we moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania, where we lived for 40 years, I ran into some other people who had similar interests, and we formed a discussion group that met every other week for 5 years. And at that point, we formed an organization. We started communicating, investigating, communicating, and a network that had hundreds of people began building up because people would contact us. So that's how I got started. And then I realized that I did some investigations and the media weren't interested. So I decided the only way I'd ever get what I was finding published is to write it. But since I wasn't a writer, I didn't like writing, I formed a team. And so a team of 30 people led by me produced a book that came out in 1976. And that I just kept building on that.
What motivated you, though? I mean, what got under, you got to be in your bonnet about this. What motivated you to get involved in this world?
Nothing that ever happened to me. People said, were you ever victimized? I said, no, basically no. No, it just annoyed me. And I thought it would annoy me that you could have something like chiropractic, which was based on a false theory. They can get licensed everywhere and take x-rays and do all kinds of things. And in my community, they were advertising just ridiculous ads. And I just decided I wanted to do something about it. And I spent the first 30-something years of my life basically building security and feathering my nest by getting an education and finding a great wife and all that stuff. And then I decided to do something for the general public.
So what's the shtick on chiropractic? Because it's not without some benefits, some evidence-based benefits. What's the true and false about chiropractic?
Well, I've always felt that spinal manipulation could help some people with acute back pain that have tight muscles by stretching the muscles. And there's a little more to it. But you have to make a distinction between spinal manipulation, spinal mobilization, stretching, whatever it's called, and chiropractic. Chiropractic theories are basically wrong. They do all kinds of things. And the vast majority of chiropractors do something wrong. Many of them will say, come and have your you have subluxations, and we'll treat your subluxations for weeks, months, or years, or maybe once a month or once a week for life. And that's wrong. The vast majority are involved with nutrition, are giving bad advice and selling supplements, all kinds of crazy gadgets. So that there's a split. That what the public is hearing about is largely the results of experiments under medical supervision that find some small amount of benefit. That has nothing to do with chiropractic in the real world, where the vast majority are telling people they have subluxations, that is, some strange chiropractic construct that other people can't see on x-rays, and that needs to be fixed.
Sure. I mean, they claim benefits for infectious diseases. They claim immunological benefits. They reorient something else, which the body doesn't have, the body's energy meridia. They make lots of claims for the way chiropractic might work. They claim it for stress reduction, neurological benefits. So they claim a lot. So, but your basic view stops at... Sorry.
Not all of them do that, but many of them do that, and many of them overtreat. And the ones who overtreat may not be the same ones that are claiming miraculous cures. The miraculous cure bunch was very prominent in the 1960s. It's become less and less, but the overtreatment bunch and the dietary supplement bunch are huge. No one's actually measured how many, but it has to be a majority.
Indeed. So, I mean, I went to chiropractic I had some back pain, and he insisted that I have x-rays, and he insisted I have this, and he insisted I have that. And then by the time I left his office, he'd prescribed $5,000 of treatment for my subluxations, which were going to eventually cripple me. So, of course, I went there because I had a sore back. And I did some research and found out that basically it's a charlatan. So before I subscribed to the $5,000 worth of subluxation treatments, I thought I'd find out what a subluxation was. It turns out there's no such thing. So,
not a chiropractic. Medical, there is an anatomical one, which is usually present at birth, doesn't cause much trouble, and not much you can do about it, and it's rare. That's got nothing to do with what chiropractors do.
Yes. So let me ask you this. So I mean, you take exception, I think, do your work on both things that are harmless and a waste of money, basically people scamming people to have them buy things that will produce no benefit. And there is also some harm. So you're also interested in harm. It's not always an easy line to draw. But let's take the stuff that looks harmless anyway. If I go to Walgreens or CVS, I walk down the aisle of my pharmacy. There'll be, 5 or 6 aisles full of useful stuff. What's the stuff on there where would I be wasting my money?
Well, I don't think there is such thing as harmless quackery, because when you purchase a worthless product, it also means you bought into a misleading belief. And if you have something that needs treatment, but you believe something else will work instead, you may be harmed. So worthless beliefs can influence the direction you go when you're sick. And that may induce delay, which could be seriously harmful. As far as walking down the store, in a drugstore, walking down the aisle, the vast majority of vitamin products are irrationally formulated. That is, if you want to take a supplement, you shouldn't usually take one that has more than 100% of whatever is in the column recommended. I forget what it's called, recommended daily amounts, or
RDA.
Whatever it is. If it's more than 100% on any product, I wouldn't buy it. If you're worried that you're not getting enough in your food, you should change your diet so you get enough in your food. But if you want to take a product for insurance, just buy the cheapest store brand multivitamin and take one every 3 days. It shouldn't have more than 100% of anything in it. There are a few people that will benefit from extra vitamin D. Whether or not people benefit from extra calcium if they don't have it in their diet, it seems to be a bit of a muddle. Some people need B12 when they get older because they stop absorbing it well. It's hard to be sure whether you're one of them. When you're pregnant, you want to make sure you get enough folic acid, but almost everybody does, unless they're extremely poor. I'm not sure there's much else to be concerned about.
Yes. So you're not, I mean, it's not a sweeping, in a sense, condemnation I did some research in the supplement industry before we spoke. It's $23 billion in America. That's no small amount of money.
That includes herbs, and because they've been put into a legal definition. But you're correct that it involves a lot of products, the vast majority of which will do nothing for you. You take too much of them, they might do some harm.
Let's go into some of the things that cause harm. I did a review. So what are some of the worst? I know that there's some harm even from stuff that looks harmless because you're subscribing to a false belief. But leaving that aside, what are some of the things that might be on the shelves that might be harmful? Or what are some of the things you can buy from a health product website that might be harmful?
That's not my focus. Harm usually is a matter of taking too much, delaying treatment, or the overall harm to society of having billions of dollars concentrating in the hands of people that want to keep our laws weak. I'm really not concerned about direct product harm. I think that there's not a lot of it. Most of it comes from contamination or maybe new products that come along, which I wouldn't follow till it happens. Mm-hmm. I'm more concerned about the harm done to our laws by the industry than I am about individual people. And I can't put out a list of harmful products because harm depends a lot on dose and it depends a lot on who makes it.
Yes, that's part of the problem. Were you involved in ephedra back, I guess it was almost 20 years ago. Was that something you were involved in?
Only that I watched from a distance, and ephedra is a perfect example of the effect of weakening our laws because the FDA used to be able to remove products like that very easily. And in the early 1990s, Congress passed a law saying you have to prove it's harmful. And that's kind of backwards. In order to market something, you should have to be able to prove it's harmless. But anyway, ephedra came along and lots of people got hurt. It took the FDA many, many years to finally drive it from the marketplace.
Yes, well, it did. And it's a perfect example of, I think, what you're worried about. It's one of the things I write about, too, and worry about is corporate corruption of, if you want, the information space. And there was something founded called the Ephedra Education Council, which sounds like it's a very beneficent, charitable organization, but which effectively was used to stymie legislation and research and suppress information that ephedra was in fact killing people, which it was. So there are documented deaths from ephedra. So I do worry about that. Is that an outlier in your view? I mean, if you're something, is that the only one of these sort of fake products that's actually cause physical harm and death? I suspect not.
Well, ephedra has some effect as a stimulant. I'm not a fan of taking stimulants, but are there other equivalent things that should have been removed? Well, yeah, there are. I don't follow them closely. I'm really not so much about danger as I am about decision making and pseudoscience and poor choice.
Yes.
Danger requires data, and it's hard to collect data, and I can't collect it so easily. I get it from secondary sources. But I can directly look at claims. I'm more about looking at claims because there you don't have to wait till somebody gets hurt. I'm more concerned about, people find this odd, but I'm more concerned about overclaim and false claims that something will work than I am about whether something will harm you. Harm is something that comes usually long after the claims. I'm more interested in, you shouldn't take this product because it doesn't make any sense.
So, yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. If you look at a website, I don't know, I imagine that I've seen in the public record some discussions that you've had, perhaps not face-to-face, with people like Merkala and Andrew Weil. And I think Deepak Chopra's obviously gone after you, which I think is marvelous. That's a sign you must be doing good work.
Chopra never went after me, not at all. No, actually, I've talked with him once. I was misquoted by a magazine, and
okay.
I was very concerned because it made me vulnerable because it said something that I just simply didn't say. And I called him up immediately. I mean, within minutes of the time that I saw the article, and said to him, look, I didn't say this. And I want you to know that I didn't say it and I don't believe it. They misquoted me or they misunderstood me. I can't remember the details.
Yeah.
And he was very cordial and thanked me. And I said, I'm going to write a retraction. And that was that.
Well, that's funny. Well, the media do very well out of creating a storm in a teacup or manufacturing controversy. That's another thing I suppose you've taken interest in. Tell me this, what about people like Mercola, Chopra's only peripherally in the health field. He's more interested in consciousness.
He used to be more, and lucky him, he had a clinic. And I thought I had grounds for the state licensing board to look at what he was doing. And just as I was about to make a complaint, he left the clinic and then removed himself basically from the practice of medicine in Massachusetts, where I thought he was vulnerable. But I haven't seen much of him lately.
So he had a clinic and he was selling Chopra-branded health interventions of one kind or another? It
was a long time ago, and I don't remember the details. We'll go to Mercola. Mercola basically retired from practice in 2006, and he's an information machine. He spends a lot of money, maybe $1 million a year, overseeing a team of writers who write his newsletter, and everything. He writes a lot of negative things about proven medical measures, and he writes a lot of speculative things or misleading things, or they do, that had to do with buying products. And so he has an information machine that is knocking science-based medicine and promoting what he sells. I've had some effect on him because when he was seeing patients, I made a complaint to the Illinois Medical Board. The board never revealed. The board filed a complaint against him, but didn't tell me. I didn't find out till years later. And it went through the courts, and I couldn't get the documents. But there was some reason that in the appellate court, the case was dropped. I think what happened is he made a settlement, and sort of a secret settlement, and stopped practicing. Whether that was a coincidence or a result of the action, I don't know. I think his license was at serious risk back in the mid-2000s when the complaint went through. The complaint is just the start of a case. I don't know. And then he no longer is vulnerable because what he does is protected by freedom of speech. He did have he was selling tanning machines with false claims, and I complained to the government, and he, at the end of the day, after a period of time, he closed his clinic. Whether that was a result of my complaint or not, I don't know, because Illinois simply doesn't tell you what they're doing till after it's over. And then, even though I was the complainer, they never told me. I don't understand what they did. But the result is, anyway, he no longer has a clinic, and he no longer sees patients, but he does perfectly fine. Probably makes a few million a year. I don't know.
So you don't spend your time adjudicating on the gray areas or trying to adjudicate authentic omega-3 and what dose of omega-3 and whether St. John's wort does what it said people claim it does. You don't spend your time that. You spend your time more like when people are making what seems to be exaggerated false claims, more like getting the authorities, more like a watchdog to get the authorities to investigate them and shut them down if that's more your MO. Is that correct?
I write about what I see, and if I see my other analogy, one is water running downhill. The other is my favorite animal from childhood is a mongoose. What does the mongoose do? The cobra is much bigger. The mongoose kind of sits there. He sees an opportunity and boom, he goes. I'm somewhat like that. If I see an opportunity to complain, I will. And I've made over 1,000 complaints. None of them take much time. Most of my complaints are about product claims. I complain to the FDA, and I'm not sure I have much effect. They ignore most of them. But every so often they issue a warning letter based on something that I've told them about. I complain to licensing boards at times or attorneys general, and sometimes my complaints hit the target and sometimes they don't. I have been used occasionally by enforcement agencies. One particular case, the FBI contacted me and I helped them in a big way to put somebody in jail. But most of the time, I just simply write. I don't try to decide in advance what's most important. I try to pick the things where I can see clearly what's wrong and write about them. And many of them would be considered by many people to be minor problems. People write to me and say, why are you complaining about this? Look at that. That's so much bigger. And I said, yeah, but I can't do anything about it, or other people are doing something. Or I get a lot of flack from people who say, why don't you go after the drug industry? And my response is, I can't keep track of all the drugs that are coming out. I don't have the expertise, but I'm after the drug industry in one respect, and that is where I can make a difference, and that is I'm part of a team that's trying to lower prices. Drug prices are outrageous, and I'm I'm a board member of a little group called Prescription Justice, which has a website and a beautiful newsletter trying to promote actions that will result in tremendous lowering of drug prices. I'm involved in that as well.
Very interesting. Yes, it's interesting. We pay between 2 and 10 times more for prescription drugs, depending on the country, depending on the drug, than they do in other countries. It's an amazing thing, right?
Well, it's more than amazing. The dynamics are extraordinary. I buy my expensive drugs from Canada. There's an organization called Pharmacy Checker, which enables you to find, they actually do site visits to foreign pharmacies and tell you which ones they think are safe. I use that. But some of the amazing things that, surprising things are, number one, the pharmacists have this verifying system. The state boards of pharmacy have this verifying system, but they won't evaluate anything outside the country. And then you have Consumer Reports, which says, go to a farm, if you want to buy online, use a verified pharmacy. And they know damn well you can get drugs cheaper and just as safely from Canada, but they won't say it. American Association of Retired Persons, same thing. The FDA keeps putting out warnings and they refuse to. They keep saying it's illegal and dangerous to buy from non-verified pharmacies, or non-approved pharmacies. It's just, they don't want to. People that normally are involved, and the same thing with Health Research Group, Public Citizen. They know perfectly well that you can buy safely from Canada, and they will not act. They will not tell their followers. It's very, very strange. So you have people, we're talking about consumer protection groups that have a following of 40 million people, and they won't tell them, buy Canadian.
That's interesting. What you reckon? What you think about that? Why would they not do that?
Well, we don't know. One guess is that they don't want to offend the FDA or with American Association of Retired Persons. They have their own pharmacy service. So that's one area. The other one is the matter of negotiating with Medicare. Medicare can't negotiate prices with drug companies. And that's the result of a law. And we know how it got passed. The drug companies bought a lot of members of Congress. So we're trying to expose that and make it a political issue. And politicians don't necessarily want to get involved in that. I've spoken to a number of them and haven't seen much in the way of results.
It's kind of funny, though. It's like saying the Department of Defense shouldn't negotiate over the prices they pay for their airplanes. Like, it's a bizarre thing. Like, when you have a big buyer like the government, I don't know what percentage of prescription drugs they might pay for in this country. It'd be fairly large, 20 or 30%, maybe. I don't know. That's a guess. But it's interesting to say that you're unable to negotiate because it's bizarre, right? Anytime the government buys something, they can negotiate.
That's our country. If you're an industry, you may have sufficient money to buy political power, and that's what happened. It can't last forever. At some point, the American public is going to wake up, and the internet is going to be a factor in waking them up. But right now, the American public is about half asleep.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Like, how is the internet? What's going to change that would have the internet, that people wake up to these kind of injustices, these kind of, we, on the one hand, we claim that speech, liberty is important. But, one of the things I say is that it's a weird kind of freedom. It's a false kind of freedom. If you have the freedom to choose, it's a false, if your choices are based on false information. And when information and data are corrupted by big money and big power, the freedom that you think you have to choose is a sham, because you're basing your choices on bad data, bad information, irrational. So it's something I find bizarre and concerning. I mean, I don't know, you haven't spent much time in tobacco, but as you obviously know the tobacco story, it's a 100-year-old story. Since about the First World War.
You don't know that I didn't spend much time in tobacco. Actually, I edited 2 books on the subject. And,
oh, did you?
I was at the front lines of years.
Yeah.
Wherever I ate, I insisted that I get a smoke-free table, and if I didn't, I walked out. Sometimes in the middle of dinner. I made a ruckus on airplanes. I helped to support the people who got the AMA to take tobacco stocks out of their retirement portfolio. And
so what I said was utterly false.
I got helped my hospital go smoke free. Oh no, I was very much involved in.
You were in the front line. But isn't it amazing to you if there was it's a thought experiment today. So it's about World War I is when doctors began to suspect the link. In 1950s, there was the Reader's Digest article. In the 1960s, there was a Surgeon General. And since then, the case against tobacco has only gotten worse and worse and worse. But there are still 500,000 deaths a year. Like, if you want to look for an example of corporate corruption of our information space and the data to be used to make choices and our laws, you can look no further than that. Because I don't know what you think about this as an analogy. If there was something on the grocery store that caused a few dozen deaths a year, it wouldn't be there very long. If there was a pharmaceutical product that caused a few dozen deaths a year, it wouldn't be there very long. But here, we have something that caused 500,000 deaths, and it's been doing so, well, it used to be much more, but 500,000 deaths, and we seem to be unable to touch it, unable to ban it.
I think we've touched it. I think that we're doing well. The percentage of smokers in the United States has been gradually dropping. It's a tough problem. You're correct.
I don't know, though. I mean, we just banned these things. Again, a few dozen deaths or a few hundred deaths. I mean, what other, even ephedra, which I spoke about a bit earlier, ephedra probably only killed 100 people, right? But we've managed to get that off the shelves. Tobacco kills 500,000, and it used to be 1.5 million. So, of course, it's come down. But is that tolerable? I mean, guns in America only kill 35,000 people. It's almost 10 times worse than the gun problem.
I don't have any statistics on the tobacco situation, but problem is I think it's so entrenched that in some ways you can't ban cigarettes because it won't work. At least I think that's the theory. But I think tobacco is gradually going down. I think eventually the world's going to be smoke free. I do. I mean, not
interesting. That's interesting. It's interesting.
I can tell you my life is smoke-free. I haven't hit cigarette smoking. I haven't seen anybody smoke a cigarette, or maybe just a couple a year in my life in recent years.
Yeah.
I haven't breathed a waft of cigarette smoke maybe more than 2 or 3 times a year. It's it's not on airplanes anymore. Things have improved tremendously. At least
they have.
Maybe not in the bad neighborhoods, but in most places.
Yes. I know someone who's moved up to northern Michigan to be near his grandchildren. And he said he went from, some kind of urban thing, New York, California, wherever he moved from, I don't remember, to northern Michigan, to a small town. They all smoke, 100%. He said. Rural Michigan, right? Very interesting. So this is great. So listen, what worries you most right now? What's the thing that really, if you were to stay, I suppose you don't probably lose sleep at night, but if you were to lose sleep, what would you lose sleep over?
Well, I'm concerned about the amount of guns we have in this country, but that's not related to quackery. If you're talking about quackery, I don't know that I have any giant concerns. And actually, the size of it isn't really relevant to what I do. I look for whatever I happen to come across that's relatively low-hanging fruit where something can be done, where I can either write about it or get the government to do something. If I were to pick the ones that annoy me the most, I would say number one is chelation therapy. The idea that you can inject people with a drug that's going to pull metals out of their body, and that's supposed to help them. That bothers me a lot because it's just totally wrong. That is, using it for heart disease and Alzheimer's and so on. It's wrong, and I think the people who offer it are really bad doctors. I don't think most of them know much about how to do proper medicine, but they've managed to stay in business, and I would like to see them stop.
Is the chelation agent administered by injection or by pill, usually in this thing?
All of the above. If you're a medical doctor or an osteopath or an acupuncturist in some states, or a naturopath, you can do it by injection. You could do it by rectal suppository. You can do it with pills. If you're a practitioner who isn't allowed to touch the patient, you can do it with fake pills or real pills. It depends upon what you can call it,
right,
even if it isn't.
But no MD doctor would administer chelation therapy speculatively. They might use it for mercury poisoning, but that's about it, right?
No. There's a network of several hundred that are administering it supposedly to treat heart disease. It has nothing to do with, they're not administering it to patients who are toxic.
Prophylaxis.
Prophylactic or more likely treatments. It just doesn't.
I mean, heavy metals are a risk. So why is? They are a risk in chelation. So why is it BS? I mean, have we got evidence-based stuff that says that it produces no benefits? I guess we probably have. You're saying.
Let's put it this way: the number of people who are getting chelation for lead poisoning, who actually have lead poisoning, is very close to zero. There are doctors who every person comes in is a candidate for lead poisoning. They're a candidate for chelation. There's one doctor testified at a hearing, chelates 98% of his patients.
Wow.
Yeah, but think about what it means if you have a doctor like that in your community who's misdiagnosing probably 100% of his patients. It's bad.
I got to tell you a funny story. I mean, I come from a scientific medical family, so I didn't see much of this stuff, but I don't want to do her a disservice. But when I fell in love with a girl from Ohio and went to visit her parents for the first time, I was well into my 40s. By then, they were not scientists, wore magnetic waistbands to, I don't even know, magnetic things on your wrist, copper wristbands. And
when I was 4, I used to carry a rabbit's foot.
Yeah. Well, they took hundreds of dollars of supplements too. So they'd been persuaded by someone. So they used to take these very expensive liquid vitamin. You just drank them every day. And I said, what are you doing that for? And they said, we had some doctor come to our home, and this was some super branded product. They got a big case of it every month. And hundreds of dollars. These weren't wealthy people, by the way. These were working people, people who were very blue collar people, and they threw a ton of money away on these things. And no one likes to hear that they've been duped. And unfortunately, that's probably something you run into your whole life, is when you're the guy who's the debunker, who says, hang on a minute, there's not much evidence, or no one often wants to hear that. So I found that was interesting. And then my ex-wife, very clever woman, she is educated. She went to Northwestern University, and she took my kids to a Quack down in Denver, who had them. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. If you hold a vial of something in your hand, they do a strength test.
Yeah, that's called applied kinesiology.
Applied kinesiology. So my 2 children, who I hasten to add, are asymptomatic, right? They do not have symptoms. I came on. The oldest one is allergic to, Christ knows, I forgot, something or other, because he held this vial in his hand. And my youngest one, who's very close to his mother, was persuaded that he's allergic to everything that's dairy. And so my youngest son, who's only 7, bless him, insisted that we go to the organic health food grocery store. And he went around asking everybody, have you got organic free cheesecake? Have you got dairy free ice cream? Have you got dairy free carrots? My 7-year-old. So on the basis of this, they were persuaded that, well, my oldest son wasn't persuaded, but my youngest son remains persuaded on the basis of this test. I found that an extraordinary thing, and she probably spent a few $200 on this doctor's visit. This person is supposedly a doctor. I can't believe she's an MD, but anyway, I have personal experience of this stuff that just leaves me. Oh, my youngest still won't have dairy unless he's at the movies, and then he has ice cream. He insists that this doctor's correct. My little boy, he's got some of his daddy's stubbornness.
Okay, I can tell you that I've been involved in probably a dozen cases where these kinds of differences led to divorce and custody battles, and they're really awful because they're often accompanied. It's not unusual when somebody gets into the clutches of a quack like that the parent doesn't want to vaccinate either, and they often go hand in hand. And I've been involved.
I won that one
in a number of battles.
I won the vaccination battle.
Okay.
She didn't fight me too hard on that. But no, it was a source of her belief system. She's very, what some people would call spiritual, whatever, into this spirit or all things alternative and something like that. And it was the ideological, because I'm hyper-rational, hyper-scientific. And
yeah, I mentioned at the beginning that I'm more concerned about not so much the toxicity of the products, but the toxicity of the beliefs that go with them. And that can be tremendously harmful, and you can't measure the harm. Most of the time, you don't even know about it. But you're giving a perfect example of who knows what bad choices might arise as a result of the misbeliefs that are brewing in the people you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, to be really harsh about it, who knows what else this moron might be into or might prescribe, right? This thing.
True.
I mean, if she really believes that you can ascertain the status of an allergy through holding a vial of something that makes no contact with the skin, obviously, in your hand, and if you really believe that, God forbid she should go near my children when they have anything serious wrong with them. So I leave my wife alone with this stuff my ex-wife alone with this stuff, but it does have some concern to me, of course.
You should make a complaint to the Attorney General.
Really? Can you do that? I mean,
sure.
Applied kinesiologies, they're not allowed to do that? Is that like against the law or whatever? Or?
Well, it's fraud. And
well, there's no shit, but
whether anything will happen depends upon several things. Number one, does the person have a license? If not, the person is breaking the law by practicing medicine without a license. The person has a license. You ask the licensing board to do something about it.
But they call themselves a naturopath. She might call herself, I mean, there's lots of people that call themselves doctors that are these
well, whether or not, I don't remember whether naturopaths are only licensed in, I think now 20 out of the 48 states. I can't remember if Colorado has licensing or not, but and Colorado doesn't have the most aggressive government protection. I would still make a complaint to the state attorney general.
That's interesting. And what would the grounds for complaint would be? Practicing medicine without a license?
You don't need grounds. You don't have to prove anything. What you can say is, this is what happened. I believe this is improper. I believe that this person is misleading the public. Can you do something about it? And whether they do something will depend on whether it resonates. You don't have to know the law. If they were to get 10 complaints, believe me, they would do something. If they get one complaint, we don't know, but maybe they have some others that they've gotten. My third analogy, which I function, is there's a poem. How does it go? I shot an arrow into the air. It fell to the ground, I know not where. I shoot arrows every day.
Right.
I don't know where they land. I don't care where they land. I can tell you many of them land, hit their target. So I just keep shooting arrows, and I encourage people, shoot them. Maybe it'll do some good.
I like it. Listen, in terms of you've been very generous with your time. We're at an hour here. Tell me this. Where could people go for more information? What can people do to either find you, support your work, or get active themselves in some way?
Well, my main website is quackwatch.org. And if you want it's got lots of things on it. It has indexes that you can browse to try to see topics of interest, or you can search. And then I have more than 20 other sites that are connected through a search engine, so you can search for topics. But I would say go down the homepage of quackwatch.org and you'll get an idea how to avoid common scams. And we have one article, for example, that signs of a quacky website. It's got 20 signs, and it works for books, people, and websites. If you see any of those things, go away, and you'll avoid 95% of all health-related scams, at least.
Which article is that? Is that the 26 signs that this thing's full of baloney?
It's actually Signs of a Quacky Website is the one that the simple things. It says, for example, if somebody sells vitamins, herbs, homeopathic products, don't take advice from that person or website or book.
Right.
Leave. And that, since almost everybody involved in health fraud and quackery
making a buck,
either recommends that everyone should take the products or sells them, that'll take you away from the bad information, the major sources.
I mean, that's the big difference, I suppose. We didn't really go into the definition or something like that. But if I go to my local doctor here or something like that, they're not getting a piece of the action if they say, here's some amoxicillin that you should take. But it's 100% the case with Mercula and with Weil and with some of these people, the Food Babe or who all of these people are, that they make a buck out of you following their advice. And you might therefore conclude that their advice isn't entirely objective, of course.
It's possible to make a buck and give objective advice. But when it comes to vitamins, herbs, homeopathic products, it doesn't happen.
Right. In practice, it never happens. In theory, it'd be possible.
Tens of thousands of people and websites and books, and it doesn't happen. It's different. There used to be doctors who dispense drugs, and they might make a little money. And that never bothered me. Because they can do it properly, and probably they do. But
it bothers me. That bothers me quite a lot.
Sometimes it's very convenient. As long as they're not price gouging, it's actually a benefit. But it's got a bad rap, and doctors don't do it much anymore.
Well, I went to a doctor in England. We have national health, so most doctors aren't private. But I ended up going to a private doctor to get my testosterone checked. Well, I didn't go for that. I went for the symptoms. And he said, let me check your testosterone. He checked my testosterone. You've got low testosterone. And he prescribed $1,000 a month treatment of implants, testosterone implants.
Well, that's great.
Surgically implants. So anyway, I'm not an idiot. So I went and first of all, researched this on the internet. And then second of all, and this guy had the fanciest, the equivalent of a Fifth Avenue in New York office, right? This is Harley Street in London. Yeah. So this is the top end of private medicine in England. And, I went to get a second opinion. I got my testosterone tested again. The guy said, your testosterone's fine. Yeah, nothing wrong. It's not that.
Well, you're describing an extreme case of an unscientific recommendation that happened to be coupled with a huge price, which is ridiculous.
But this guy's the equivalent of a Beverly Hills doctor or a Midtown Manhattan surgeon.
Well, you got tipped off, but I can tell you that it's not what I'm talking about when I say that doctors used to keep common drugs, particularly in rural areas.
Right. No, I like to think that was an outlier, but the guy probably sees 10 people a day or more. So I don't know how many of them.
People might think he's a crook.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as I said, they don't come any more exalted than this man's position in the UK medical community where he has his office. And
I would imagine if half a dozen people complained to the licensing authorities that he would be stopped.
Well, I didn't. It was 20 years ago, and I guess I would today. And I think that's one message that I think people can take away from you is that don't stay stumm about this sort of thing. If you see something that you think's awry, make a complaint, and then they'll do what they do, right? They'll either investigate or they won't. They'll take action or they won't. But I think that's your real message to consumers is that don't stay quiet about this. Speak up if you see something anomalous. Is that right? Is that your counsel?
There's certainly a message, and sometimes people are afraid to complain because they're afraid they get sued or something, and that doesn't happen, because if you make a complaint privately to a government agency, you're protected.
How many lawsuits would you have had against you? They sue you. You'd be like our president. You'd have a team of 30 lawyers trying to keep you out of jail.
That would be expensive.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. Look, I'm very grateful for your time. We're going to stop the podcast there, but I'll put links to all your stuff in the show notes, and Quack Watch, some of your books. Very grateful. Thanks for your time very much.
Quite welcome. We have a free newsletter too. But
all right, good. Yeah, I enjoyed this a great deal. It was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
You do great work.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Stephen.
Bye.
Hey there. This is the part where I get to talk about cool books, movies, TV, stuff in pop culture, at least the stuff that I pay attention to. What amazes me, and in truth, it frightens the pants off me as an author, is just how many amazing books appear each week. I mostly read nonfiction, books by editors of The Atlantic or editors of The Economist or famous politicians or CEOs or public intellectuals or academics who can also write and reach the public. I don't know if any of you are weird like this, but when I get the New York Times or The Economist, the first pages I turn to are the book reviews to see what great stuff is up there. And I try and get many of these people on the show. There's a new book out called New Power by Jeremy Hymans that looks very intriguing. That was reviewed by David Brooks in the New York Times. And he's on my list of people. Well, I've already had conversations with his people about getting it scheduled, so it's likely he'll be on the show. But today I want to talk about a book that I think sets out the stall against suspect science more elegantly than any other book that I've ever read. And it's by a Brit doctor called Ben Goldacre. He's a young guy. He's really funny. His book's called Bad Science. And rather than just tell you what to think about the various topics he covers, he actually most helpfully tells you how to tell the difference between good and bad science for yourself. And as citizens and consumers, and especially in a world where, with the internet, it's very hard sometimes. There's a website that will defend every point of view. You need to be able to make calls sometimes for yourself about what's good science and what bad science. And Ben Goldacre does that. He, two topics he does cover in some really humorous detail are detoxes, which are nonsense, and the Wakefield controversy, which, Andrew Wakefield, the study he did on autism on a very small number, I think it was 6 children or something like that. I mean, the guy probably has, thousands of deaths from preventable diseases on his hands because of the chicanery with that study and the controversy afterwards. So Ben Goldacre's book, Bad Science, is just really one of my favorite books. It's about 10 years old now, but there are links to that in the show notes. But he doesn't let the pharmaceutical industry off the hook. So he first went after the somewhat softer targets of the junk science people. But his next book was called Bad Pharma. And that, in a way, is even more scary because the pharmaceutical industry has substantial financial incentives to sell us stuff, even if the stuff works marginally or questionably. And they have lots of different ways of manipulating both the data they submit and the ways of marketing products that are certainly at the best in the gray area. So he talks about that in Bad Pharma, which is a great and, I say, very scary book. Anyway, Goldacre is one of my heroes, and you can find links to his books in the show notes. On the TV front, for you TV addicts, I can't wait for Westworld Season 2 next week, but I've got news. This is actually really bad news. I can't imagine, because I think there are 8 seasons of this damn thing, but I think I'm now addicted to Homeland, unfortunately. I watched 5 episodes. I'd avoided it because of the seemingly racist undertones. All the Muslims are baddies and all the Marines are good guys. But it's very well done, and it's very addicting, very, very well-drawn characters. If you watch sci-fi with your kids, there's a remake of Lost in Space on Netflix. It's better than the 1960s ones. I don't know if you remember Dr. Smith and the robot and Danger of Will Robinson, but it's pitched pretty squarely at the 8 to 12-year-old age range, but it'd be kind of fun to watch with your kids because the heroes, of course, the heroes of the story are the children, are the Robinson children, Will Robinson, the prodigious 7 or 8-year-old or whatever he is. Anyway, that's all for now. Links to some of those things in the show notes. Thank you once again. Don't forget to like or share the podcast or do what you can to spread the word if you do enjoy it. And I'll talk to you in a few weeks. Thanks. To celebrate the launch of the show, and to thank you all for listening, I'm going to be giving away books. Lots and lots of books. All you have to do is leave a review in iTunes. We're going to raffle off a book every single week for 12 weeks. So head on over to paulgibbons.net/iTunes to get easy-to-follow directions and let me know the title of your review to make sure that you're entered to win. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Think Bigger, Think Better. Great ideas are great, but this isn't gospel. Share your critical thinking in the comments. Where do I disagree? What insights were most powerful? If you got value, don't forget to share the value by sharing the podcast. Finally, to get information on book and blog releases and new video content, head over to paulgibbons.net and join the community of thinkers talking about using science and philosophy to make our world a better place.